Today we will be sharing how we make our mākāhā at Heʻeia fish pond. The word mākāhā is made up of two words, maka or I and ha or breath. In this sense, a mākāhā is the space that allows a local i'a or fish pond to breathe, just like the rising and falling of the tides. A mākāhā is a sluice gate, which allows smaller fish to enter and feed on the phytoplankton growing in the rich waters, where they then grow too large to fit back through the gaps. It is a vital component to the workings of the fish pond. First, we need to gather our wood. We use mangrove wood mostly because it's strong and readily available on site. Look for straight pieces and make sure to avoid rotten wood. Cut off any branches and large knobs. For this particular mākāhā, we collected 35 to 40 pieces to use as vertical slats, and at least 2 longer and thicker pieces for cross beams. This was one of our biggest and longest mākāhā, and we used a lot of fairly thick pieces. After gathering our materials, we need to debark the wood. The fresher the wood is, the easier it is to debark. You can remove the bark by striking it with another piece of wood. If you are unable to debark your pieces right away, make sure to soak them. This will allow you to debark them more easily than if they sat out in the sun untouched. You can debark older pieces of wood by scraping it with a machete, or in this case, another piece of wood. Once all the pieces are gathered and debarked, you can cut and grind or sand down any larger knobs that might get in the way. Make sure you do a thorough job on the cross beams. You can also choose to sand down your pieces to prep them for oil treatment at this point. Next, we cut all of our vertical pieces to height. Again, the measurements depend on which mākāhā space you're making it for. Then, we coated all of the pieces with 2 coats of mineral oil. This step is also optional, but we found that it keeps barnacles off better, making the mākāhā last longer in the water. The more coats, the better. Now you're ready to put it together. You'll be attaching your cross beams to something sturdy and tall, like the legs of a tent or poles or posts in the ground. Rotate the crossbeam until you find the spot with the fewest curves in it. Ideally, you'd want a totally straight piece. You don't want the crossbeam to have a bow in it that goes from side to side because you want your mākāhā to be as flat as possible. A vertical bow is better than side to side. Also, make sure you situate the crossbeams at the appropriate height to provide support during strong tides. Before you begin lashing, you might want to consider prepping your paracord or whatever you're using to lash. Take one end of your paracord between your pointer and thumb and measure down to your elbow. This unit of measurement is called a ha'ilima. Next, wrap your cord around your pinky and thumb, keeping your hand as outstretched as possible. When you're almost to the end of the cord, grab what you just wound up, take off what's on your thumb, and using this motion, create half hitches that tie up your cord nicely. Make sure your loops don't overlap and that you lay them one on top of the other. Do this until you run out of string. The end that you made a ha'ilima with can be pulled out whenever you need length. This is called making a shaka. Notice how the loops climb neatly and don't overlap. Once you've figured out how you want to situate your cross beams, lash them onto your sturdy pole using the upa'a lash. Begin with a slip knot, sliding it as tight and close to the junction as possible. Cross it over the metal pole and behind the cross beam, back around the metal pole, and behind the cross beam again, ending up where your start knot was. Do this one more time, making sure you stay inside of the lines you just made. The spaces between your lines should be skinnier than the width of the beams they're holding onto. Then, you're going to throttle around the area in between where your beams are touching. Wrap it around to create the throttle which locks in your lash. Wrap it around again counterclockwise, feeding your shaka through a loop. Pull down on your cord to cinch the lash tightly. Do this one more time, and then do it again clockwise. You should have this little loop if you're doing it right. Lastly, create your stop knot, which is just a regular knot, and make sure it's as close to the lash as possible. Cut off any excess. Once you've lashed all the rungs to your mākāhā, this lash will be cut off. Now we can begin lashing the vertical rungs. Again, using the ʻpa'a lash, lash the outside rungs first, leaving some empty space on each side of the top crossbeam. This is where you would be handling the mākāhā when dropping it into the space once it's completed. Work your way into the middle. Place your rungs about 1.5 inches away from each other, or to make it easier, use a 2-finger trick. Rotate each rung to determine the best placement. Each rung should touch both the top and bottom cross beams. Make sure that the space created between your rungs isn't wide enough to let fish escape. After you finish closing up the gaps, your mākāhā should be totally completed. Now all that's left to do is to install the mākāhā into the water. The very last step is making sure that there are no gaps underneath the mākāhā and that it sits inside perfectly. We hope you enjoyed this video and feel inspired to make one of your own. Mahalo and malama.